You know that person who's weirdly calm in a crisis? The one everyone turns to when things fall apart. Not because they volunteered, but because something about them just says, I've seen worse. Yeah, that person has a story they're probably not telling you. And I'm not talking about someone who had a rough week or a bad breakup. I'm talking about the kind of experiences that quietly rearrange everything. How you think, how you love, how you sit in a room full of people and still feel like you're watching from behind glass. Here's what most people don't understand about someone who's been through too much. Their brain isn't broken. It's been retrained. Every difficult thing they survived forced their nervous system to adapt, to become hyper-aware, hyper-functional, always scanning, always ready. It's not a flaw. It's what kept them alive. But the problem is, the software never got the update that the emergency is over. So now they're walking around in a perfectly safe Tuesday afternoon, and their body is still bracing for impact. Let me explain what this actually looks like from the inside. You'd assume someone who's been through hell would be angry, bitter, shut down. And sometimes, sure, that happens. But more often than not, something unexpected develops. They become the most perceptive people in any room. Not because they studied psychology, but because reading people was once a matter of safety. A slight shift in someone's tone, a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, a pause that lasts half a second too long. They catch all of it. Most people walk into a room and notice the decor. These people walk in and immediately feel the tension between the two friends sitting on opposite ends of the couch. Psychologists have a term for what happens when someone doesn't just recover from hardship, but actually grows because of it. Richard Tedeschi, a researcher at the University of North Carolina, calls it post-traumatic growth. And the data is honestly kind of remarkable. His research suggests that somewhere between half and two-thirds of people who experience significant adversity don't merely return to baseline, they surpass it. Their sense of purpose sharpens. Their relationships become more intentional. They develop this almost absurd appreciation for ordinary moments, a quiet morning, a genuine laugh, a sunset that nobody else even looks up for. They notice all of it, and it hits them harder than it hits most people, because they know what it feels like when all of that gets taken away. But here's the part that doesn't make it into the inspirational quotes. That same heightened awareness comes with a cost: hyper-vigilance. Their internal alarm system, the one that was so useful during the hard times, it doesn't just switch off when life gets easier. It keeps running, always scanning for threats, always calculating exits, always holding just a little bit back in case things go sideways again. Ever notice how some people always need to sit facing the door at a restaurant? Or how they seem to have a backup plan for their backup plan? That's not being dramatic. That's a nervous system that was taught through experience. That safety is something you build, not something you're given. And here's the thing that'll quietly mess with you. These people almost never talk about what they've been through. Not because they're hiding it exactly, but because they've developed this reflex of minimizing their own experience. It wasn't that bad. Other people had it worse. I'm fine, really. It's almost like admitting pain feels like losing. Like if they acknowledge how hard it was, the whole structure they built to survive it might collapse. The irony is brutal. The people who understand suffering the most are often the worst at letting themselves be comforted by it. Now let's talk about how this shows up in relationships, because this is where it gets complicated. People who've endured too much tend to become one of two things: fiercely loyal or frustratingly distant. And sometimes, somehow, both at the same time. They'll drop everything to help you at 2 a.m. without a second thought. But the moment you ask them what they need, what they're struggling with, what's actually going on beneath the surface, suddenly they're fine. Always fine. Everything's fine. Why? Because vulnerability for them has historically been expensive. When your early experiences teach you that opening up leads to disappointment, or that depending on someone means giving them the power to hurt you, your brain builds walls. Not out of coldness, but out of memory. And those walls don't come down just because someone is kind. Kindness, in fact, can feel suspicious. Consistent love can feel disorienting. Because when you've spent years earning safety through self-reliance, being cared for without conditions doesn't feel like relief. It feels like waiting for the catch. So they develop this painful contradiction. They want closeness desperately, but flinch when it arrives. They learn to need nobody. And from the outside, that looks like strength. From the inside, it's one of the loneliest things a person can experience. But something else happens that most people overlook entirely. These individuals become almost unreasonably good at adapting. Chaos doesn't paralyze them the way it paralyzes others. New environment? They adjust. Plans fall apart? Already recalibrating. Life throws something completely unexpected? They've been training for this since they were kids. And the humor. Let's talk about the humor. Because people who've been through too much are often the funniest people you'll ever meet. And it's not surface-level funny. It's that deep, dark, absurdist humor that makes you laugh and then immediately wonder if you should be concerned. But that humor isn't recklessness. It's reclamation. When you can look at the things that nearly destroyed you and find something absurd in them, you take their power away. Every joke is a small act of resistance against the pain that has tried to define them. Here's something that might surprise you, though. Underneath the adaptability, the humor, the empathy, the composure, there's a grief most people never see. And it's not grief for someone they lost. It's grief for themselves. The version of them that trusted without calculating risk. The version that could be silly without scanning the room first. The version that didn't flinch at loud voices or rehearse conversations before having them. They mourn a lightness they barely remember having, a softness the world didn't let them keep. And how do you explain that to someone? How do you say, I miss a version of myself I'm not sure ever fully existed? That kind of grief doesn't have a name, but it shapes everything. It makes them quieter, more deliberate. It's why they value peace so fiercely, because they know exactly what chaos costs. It's why they protect their energy like it's sacred, because for a long time, it was all they had. And maybe that's the real psychology underneath all of this. People who've been through too much don't just survive their experiences. They develop a depth of understanding about what it means to be human that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. They know that strength was never about keeping it together. It was about falling apart and choosing, again and again, to put yourself back together, even when some of the pieces have changed shape. Their pain became perception. Their survival became wisdom. And somewhere along the way, without trying to, they became the person others feel safe around. Not because their life was easy, but because they learned to carry difficulty without letting it consume them. So the next time you meet someone who seems a little too steady in the storm, a little too quick with a joke when things get heavy, a little too okay with uncertainty, just know they didn't wake up like that. They were built that way, by things they probably don't talk about, in rooms nobody else was in. And somehow, despite all of it, they're still here, still showing up, still choosing to care about people even when caring has burned them before. That's not just resilience. That's something most people will never fully understand unless they've lived it. If this hit home for you, please subscribe. And if you want to support more deep dives like this, leaving a like and a comment really helps more than you'd think. I would genuinely appreciate your support.